Jacob, you said it's not a faith crisis, it's a faith renovation, and you have a really interesting story about building your faith from the ground up in a way that's unshakable, undeniable, and undisprovable, which is awesome. So hit it. You've renovated your faith. Now you're showing it off to your friends. And they say, oh, I love your tile. Where'd you get it? Where do people start that want to renovate their faith as you did?
I would actually, and this may sound funny because people tend to think I'm super orthodox, go outside the church. I actually want you to start to go and see the best arguments of theism for why does God exist, and not just the arguments that come from our church, because our church actually doesn't address that question much. The arguments for why it's rational and intelligent and why theism is a better argument than atheism.
Wait, so you're suggesting that our church doesn't do a good job?
I think
and by our church, you mean the leadership?
I mean
predominantly
specific.
Of what
No,
generation?
I don't think it's necessary. I think the church's role is to preach to those that are at level 2 to bring them into level 3. And then I would say that I think that there's a bigger project going on. There's the project of believers, and you should know and understand what other believers say and why atheism is wrong, because it is, and it's not a good position. And then from there, you should look at the Christians and why, out of all the conceptions of God that are out there, why is Christianity superior to other conceptions of the ultimate power? And read C.S. Lewis, read George MacDonald, read G.K. Chesterton. I mean, those guys are awesome, right? Those are guys at kind of that level of conversation. And then now you're ready for the church. Now all of a sudden the church is going to freaking shine. And if there are things in the restoration that are hard to figure out, I'm kind of like, well, all right, that's hard to figure out. But at the end of the day, I still believe that Jesus was the Christ, and I still believe that this is the best explanation for what he's about.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Midnight Mormons. I am your host, Cardin Ellis, and today we are joined in the studio with Brad Whitbeck, Jacob Hansen, and Kwaku L. And I don't even know how to explain this. This one, it's really funny, kind of polemic. Your faith crisis is overrated. Hit it. I feel like this is Jocko Willenick, where like the bald dude is like, so
emotions, you know,
they are asking about a faith crisis, and he's like, faith crisis, it's overrated.
Move on. Straight up, move on.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like
I've never had a crisis, but that's just because I'm not a woman. So I'm wondering. That's a Vladimir Putin quote.
Putin says, quote, I am not a woman, so I don't have bad days.
Where they said, do you ever have bad days? And he goes, I don't have bad days because I'm not a woman.
oh my God.
Uh-oh. We got Kwaku over here on Putin's side. Well, no.
No. Zelensky
Dude.
all the way.
Kwaku loves all of the dictators. L. Ron Hubbard. You know,
L. Ron Hubbard was not a dictator. He was the founder of Scientology and a good man.
Okay.
I'm not getting them on my bad side, dude. I'll piss off. I ain't pissing off those people. I like them.
That's funny. Okay, cool. So you had a really interesting phrase, Jacob. You said it's not a faith crisis, it's a faith renovation, and you have a really interesting story about building your faith from the ground up in a way that's unshakable, undeniable, and undisprovable, which is awesome. So hit it.
Yeah, so I went through what I call kind of a faith renovation, right? And I'm actually working on putting together a video of this for my channel, for anyone who knows, Thoughtful Faith on YouTube, if you want to look me up and watch this video when I finish it. But the basic idea is I just want to tell my story of how I kind of went through this process. So I'm one of 8 kids, and I currently am the only one who's still an active member of the church. And when I left on my mission in 2005, all of my siblings were active in the church. And when I came home, 2 of the 3 guys who were most influential in getting me on my mission had left the church by the time I got home.
Wow.
So,
dude, woke happens fast. Seriously.
This was pre-woke though. This is back in like the new atheist age, right? So this is Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins. They're writing their books smashing on God, right? And So what happens is I come home.
Cowards, all of them.
I come
They'll
home.
smash on Christianity, but they wouldn't touch Islam.
Sam
Do
will.
they?
He gets in a lot of trouble for that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sam Harris.
Yeah, that Bill Maher thing with him and Bill
Yeah.
Maher going on, that was tense. That was a tense video.
Yes, it was.
It was awesome.
So as I went through this, when I got home from my mission, my brother, he told me kind of that he had we talked about why he left the faith and stuff. And it was funny because he said, he didn't say to me, kind of your typical CES letter type stuff. He said, Jacob, I don't have, my problem isn't really with that. It's more fundamental. I don't believe in God anymore. And it was kind of like, oh, I'm kind of used to people talking about like problems with Joseph Smith, not problems with God. Yeah. And so I began to be introduced to sort of all these atheistic arguments, and I had to contend with them for the first time. And so I started at that level, at kind of the very basic, like, why do I even believe in God at all? And as I got into this, I actually, it's funny enough, I watched a lot of debates between theists and atheists. And a lot of these people weren't members of the church, but they had really good arguments about why theism, just generally, let's say, it is better than atheism, and why atheism just kind of doesn't make sense, right? And so I arrive at this spot where I'm like, okay, I believe in God. And so I believe in God, but then there's sort of this, all right, well, what's the next level? So I like to describe my testimony as kind of being built on 3 separate independent conversations. The first being like, is it reasonable to believe in God, right? Does God exist, right? When we look at reality, does it make more sense to be an atheist or a theist in the broadest sense?
Okay.
And then, so I get to that point that you're a theist.
So why does being a theist make more sense? I mean, you said you came across a lot of these arguments, so they should be easy to regurgitate, right?
Well,
all of them at once, right now.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah. So
no, but seriously, like, what's your top one?
I would say probably one of my favorites, I think, is the argument from fine-tuning and the complexity of the universe. The universe is just, it's just too improbable. The constants of the universe, if any of them are off in the slightest degree, people say that we live in like a Goldilocks planet, a Goldilocks universe. I also say another big one is just me. Like, what the frick am I? I am
slightly balding, middle-aged.
Exactly. But a human being. So I use this analogy, for instance. So we have all the animals that have ever existed. Have there ever been animals that are like cats in the history of the planet? Yeah, there's been lots of different things that were like cats. There's been lots of things that were kind of like dogs or, those animals. Has there ever been anything in the billions of years of our planet that has ever been anything like us? And people say, oh, we're kind of like monkeys. No. I'm sorry. Monkeys didn't fly to the moon. Monkeys did not create the Sistine Chapel. Monkeys do not do those kinds of things.
Jacob, it's funny that you asked that question because I have an answer.
What's your answer?
You ever heard of the reptilian shapeshifters?
You
You didn't think I could work it into this episode, did you, Carden? Look at that.
Oh,
look at that.
You are second to none.
So at the base here, we have the first level of conversation, you have the conversation about God. The second level is, okay, so God, right? I believe in some sort of a higher power. A lot of people are at that point, right? But what about that God? Like, if God never has manifested himself in the world in some way, if he doesn't interact with the world, it's as if he doesn't exist. Like, if he doesn't interact with us. So
that's true. Same thing.
So at what point do we start going, okay, well, then where's God in the world? And now there's a lot of different people who offer explanations of God in the world, like how he interacts with us.
In the flowers, in the trees, in the waterfall.
I don't think any story is more compelling than the story of Jesus Christ. If God entered into the world and interacted with humankind in some way, that Jesus story has something to do with it. That seems to me amongst all the explanations available, because I have to pick something, right? Otherwise I go back to atheism.
Well, it's also the most tragic story. I mean, the highest of deity being the firstborn, okay, comes to earth. And then despite living perfectly, performing miracles, he's betrayed by his friends, abandoned by those closest to him, tortured by the state, hated by the semi-state religious leaders. As Jordan Peterson said, everybody knows he was innocent, but he's still persecuted anyway.
Well, and Jordan Peterson
descends into hell. Like, doesn't just suffer the mortal things that we go through, but like descends into hell and then arises.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And so the idea, and Jordan Peterson is operating, by the way, in these levels of conversation, the level 1 and level 2 conversation. And people are fascinated by that story. And he will bring people who are atheists into a general theism and even to start to look seriously at Christianity, right? And then, now, what happens when you actually believe that the Jesus story from the New Testament is true? Now we're ready for our conversation. Now you're at level 3. Now is when the missionaries knock on your door.
I love how you've already given this levels like it's an MLM. You know what I'm saying? Like we're like selling, like you pretty soon you're gonna get rid of their thief.
Well, think of it like this though.
You go forth 2 by 2, right? And you get your friend.
Yeah, but he's about to sell us on level 3, which sounds really interesting. I'm gonna get seriously purged here, so keep going.
No, that is where
is there a package deal?
Does it come with an actual lobster? Is what I want to know.
It comes with eternal salvation, eternal families is great. I'll tell you all about it. I'll send 2 guys to your house.
Okay.
So the idea here is that at level 3 is where our church has operated historically, because we lived in a Christian world.
Right.
People already believed in God and they already believed in Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And so like the missionary discussions when they went out, it's like, well, you're teaching to Christians.
And that's why the pre-internet boomers who are detached from the society that is all, no, I'm just kidding.
Do you know what? I actually realized this a lot on my mission because I served in New York, where we were kind of instructed to lead off with lesson 1 about the restoration, right? But we found that wasn't really doing much for people in New York.
Yeah, what do you talk to a Laotian about whose parents literally have a hybrid faith that comes from southeastern indigenous tribes mixed with Buddhism?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna lead off with Joseph Smith. You know what I'm saying?
And that's why the church was so successful in Christian societies.
But what we ended up doing is we just started teaching Plan of Salvation first. And it started fixing that problem. And you know what's interesting is the missionary lessons, lesson 2 being the Plan of Salvation, kind of goes over the first level thing you're talking about.
Yes.
Right? Like what is God? And then lesson 3, Gospel of Jesus Christ, goes over level 2.
Yep.
And then level 3, the restoration, goes over that level 3 that you're talking about here.
And in a Christian world, you talking to a Christian and you're saying, you know that Jesus, let me tell you, that you believe in, let me tell you about what he's doing today.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you about the New Testament. Let me read you scriptures that you already believe in. You guys, we don't live in a Christian world anymore. We live in a world now that is not Christian. They don't accept any of this. So you have to go back to an even more basic conversation. We need to go back to level 1 and level 2. And here's the other thing that I realized when I kind of went through this process of what I call a faith remodel is I went down to the bottom first. And I realized that I needed to strengthen the foundations upon which everything was sitting. We're doing the temple remodel right now, the church is on the Salt Lake Temple. And where did they go? They went all the way down to the bedrock. To the most, and if we were to use that in this analogy.
I'm sensing an object lesson coming
from
like a
brother.
mile away.
Exactly. and we go down to the bedrock, and at the bedrock you have the most basic conversations.
The tunnels they use to smuggle in the Freemasons.
and at this basic level, this is again that level 1 conversation. That is where most people are stuck at right now in our society. That is why I'm such a big fan of Jordan Peterson, because if you want to meet someone who is having the conversation right now at level 1, it's him. And he is attracting droves of people. One man.
Ooh, I never hear the word droves outside of the context of people leaving in droves. Well, so this is great.
Well, that's the thing. People in droves are coming back because here's the thing. People in the church, I've noticed so many of them, they're leaving. Are they all becoming Baptists? Are they all becoming Catholics? Are they all becoming other faiths? No. They're all becoming atheist agnostic types. Why? I asked myself this question. I said, if I were to find out that Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet, what would that do to my belief in Jesus Christ and in God? Well, wait a minute. Why would my belief in Jesus Christ end because this guy was a false prophet? And I started to realize a lot of people believe in Jesus because of Joseph instead of believing in Joseph because of Jesus. And the first principle of our gospel is faith in Jesus, not in Joseph. We have to build our testimonies from the ground up. So what happens is our society is eating away at the theism and Christianity in our society and giving people a new way of looking at the world that is toxic to that foundation. It's like an acid that's eating away at it. And so what happens is that's the shelf, by the way, that that people are resting their testimonies on. And that shelf is getting weaker and weaker to where there's the slightest thing that's out of order in the church, it breaks.
Or even the slightest thing out of order in their lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is, but you have to remember, that's the shelf, guys. The shelf is made of your faith in God and Jesus
I prefer
Christ.
to victim blame the individual person instead of the system that led to it. But yeah, sure. You can go on. No,
So within that idea is that we now are dealing with an acid wash of the foundations of faith generally. And if you want to, the first thing I think a person should do if they have a quote unquote faith crisis is stop obsessing over the church. You need to go ask yourself if you believe in God.
Interesting.
Do you believe in God? Why? Have you actually had that conversation with yourself? Because I'll tell you what right now, if you don't believe in God and Jesus Christ, and I mean solidly, Joseph Smith's story is absurdity. I mean, it's cuckoo nonsense. Why do you think these people laugh at us? Why do they laugh at us? It's because they're secularists. These people don't even believe in God. If you believe in God, suddenly the Jesus story becomes plausible. If you believe in Jesus, all of a sudden the Joseph story becomes plausible. It's like, oh, he had gold plates. Well, you believe in a guy who walked on freaking water and rose from the dead. Is it really that improbable that a guy in New York saw an angel? All of a sudden it becomes within the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time I ever saw algebra as a little kid, and I was like, what in the frick is that? That is a bunch of nonsense on the board. And I still see that with some equations that are on the board. But if I didn't understand arithmetic, and then from arithmetic, I could learn basic algebra. And then from algebra, I then was prepared to understand calculus. If you don't have a belief in God and Jesus Christ, you are not ready for the restoration. You're not ready for it. Because our message of the restoration is a specific narrative about Jesus. But you don't believe in Jesus. So why are we talking to you about this specific narrative about Jesus?
I had a really good professor, Mark Matthews at BYU, and he talked about how glad tidings is good news. And he said one thing we forget is that news has to be new. And the restoration, the Doctrine and Covenants calls it the glad tidings of our day over and over again. But the story of Joseph Smith is new. If you don't know what already happened, you're not going to understand what's about to happen. So if we do pitch people Joseph Smith and they don't know the old news, they're not going to know the new news. And so what you're saying, it's totally like, I'm there with you.
And it sounds to me like you're saying there are people who are even in the church who only hear the Joseph Smith narrative about things, but they don't have that foundation of God and Christ.
Here's the cool thing. I went to school in the 7th grade. I was sent to an evangelical school. And I full on had like Baptist teachers Bible bashing me in the 7th grade about why Joseph Smith was a liar and why our theology is broken.
Better than going to a Catholic school and have them do something else.
I went to Catholic schools too.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
That's Quaker's lie.
I know. I grew up in Los Angeles. It was really bad here and in Boston. All right,
I went to Catholic schools through high school, and I actually was a student body president at Catholic high school. So
I'd rather get bashed in my Bible than bashed in my. That's all I gotta say.
Oh my God.
Too soon.
oh my
It was
gosh.
bad. We're editing
1,400 years too soon for that joke,
But here's the thing. In those experiences, I actually gained a kind of an independent view of Jesus Christ and God, where I sort of believed in them independent of the church to some extent. If you've spent your whole life living in Utah and you've never really encountered the deeper questions of God and Jesus Christ, you believe in God and Jesus Christ because of the Joseph Smith story. You've never gone out and independently worked in these other conversations to be convinced of them independent of the Joseph Smith story, right? And I think people need to do that, because if you are sure that God is real and that there is a God in this universe, and then from that you arrive at the conclusion that that Jesus Christ, that person in the New Testament, God was in that in some way. I believe that story is fundamentally true.
Okay, so when we had Jim Bennett,
then you go there.
We had Jim Bennett in here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our most interesting discussions with him was how he thought the number one problem facing people in the church right now that he thought had to be addressed was a misperception of prophetic fallibility. And we had a great podcast based on that, right? Would you say from your view where you're sitting, the number one problem in the church is that we are in this level 3 discussion and we've neglected the base of the argument, and we haven't developed that relationship with God first, and then Jesus Christ second, and then third, the restoration that we've been doing in reverse order. I've already gone too long on this, but what would you say? Do you feel that what would you say is the number one thing preventing people from doing this, and how do we fix it? This faith renovation of yours.
So I think within the church itself, I think we are too focused on the church and the restoration per se, and we are not going down into having independent faith in God and Jesus Christ. I think that
Is that because of our outer touch boomer leadership that grew up in formative years of extreme amounts of Christianity?
There it is.
whatever you want to attribute
has
to
not addressed the founding principles, has neglected them, and they've slowly atrophied under the influence of perpetual secularism.
It's because of all of the members who get bored of faith lessons and never internalize them.
Well,
even though they're taught the correct principles all the time.
I prefer to externalize upon people who are morally obligated to just listen and take it.
And I prefer to victim blame the people who are suffering. Okay.
So
right.
the issue that I see is that we live in a society where faith in God and Jesus Christ has eroded, and we are not immune from that. Our members are losing faith in God and Jesus Christ. They're adopting secular worldviews and a secular way of looking at the world, and that destroys the foundation upon which we build our testimonies. And if we want to fix it, we need people to gain faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So
how do we fix it though? Like seriously, like somebody is sucking at something.
But I would, all right. So,
okay, like seriously, like we're sucking at something. How do we unsuck at that thing?
So I would approach it from 2 angles. Okay. Number one is that people leave the church for intellectual reasons or moral reasons. And usually it's a combination of the two. But one is primary. Okay. And I noticed that early on.
Yeah. Primary was tough. Oh wait, no, never mind. Okay. Sorry.
So like, for instance, I have relatives who left the church because their primary issue was intellectual. They didn't have a moral qualm. It wasn't like they hated church policies or whatever. They just couldn't square it in their head.
And they just self-aggrandized as an intellectual. So when something pseudo-intellectual came along, they amplified it into something that wasn't. Okay,
but I think there are people who have genuine intellectual challenges in the church because there are hard questions that have to be addressed, right? And some people can't get around those. Now, what I would say though is that now what we're seeing more because of kind of wokeism is that now people's issue it's not intellectual, it's moral. It's that they don't like the church because the church doesn't fit within their expressive individualist way of seeing the world because it tells people what to do and tries to define who people are. Okay? Go ahead.
And I would say that part of it just comes from, actually, weirdly enough, something going back to the dating episode that we did just recently with Kwaku, talking about how quickly and dramatically you can have communication happen between even like a spouse, like to husband and wife. If the wife's mad about something, texting her husband, if he doesn't respond right away, we expect like a quick response now, right? And I like the idea of looking at this as a faith renovation rather than a faith crisis, because I think our society is overdramatic, and that we want to dramatize the things that we're going through in our lives. And so it's easy to look at it as a faith crisis. And so we have this dichotomy of either you're blindly faithful or you go through your faith crisis. And that's the only 2 options that you have.
Or maybe you just realize life is tough and you mature into it and you grow up.
Well, here's what happens.
And have your faith renovation.
So the faith renovation, here's the thing. People will encounter things and their shelf breaks, and now it's like I heard a great analogy from a friend of mine that it's like a puzzle. You had this puzzle, it made sense, and then all of a sudden it all fell on the floor, right? Now some people when your puzzle falls on the floor, you basically go into grief mode. They're upset, right? They feel like their spouse cheated on them, kind of a thing. They describe it that way, like people who have a genuine loss of faith. And what happens is some people stay in that resentful state, John DeLynn, and then literally sit there and
I like this guy.
and literally they sit there and try and just destroy, and they're so stuck in the resentment of their grief that they just sit there and fester in that. And we've all seen these people online. And it's like, these people need to get over that, because the problem is, you still have the problem of your puzzle is on the floor. Right. And you got to figure out how to find meaning in your life. And a lot of them, this is kind of the second thing that a lot of people end up in, is then they start going, crap, well, like, what do I do now? How do I live my life? Like, and this is where I say, don't go through this big dramatic process. Say, look, what you need to do is you need to start picking up puzzle pieces and putting them back on the table. And you need to reconstruct a puzzle. Now, this is going to be a journey from the bottom up, okay? And that's where I think when you're in that place where the puzzle's on the floor, you're miserable, nihilistic, all that kind of stuff, that's why Jordan Peterson is resonating so much with people. Because he's going to those people with their puzzle on the floor, and he's saying, hey, look, let's start from the very beginning.
Yeah, people are going to think we're a Jordan Peterson podcast, not like Midnight Mormons. Midnight Petersonites.
So my big thing with Jordan Peterson and why I think he's a really interesting person to watch is because
he's Canadian.
It is because he's
or
Canadian.
Red Skull.
Or Red Skull.
He's Red Skull. What?
Oh, you didn't know that? The woke people hate him. So they actually made him the character Red Skull, which is the ultimate Hitler villain in Marvel movies. Yeah, like they literally made him. Oh, I'm going to put that up on the screen. Yeah,
it was like, clean your room, Red Skull.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have one of those, do you?
Straighten up what you can straighten up.
Gosh, what the
Yes.
heck?
Wait, who is Jordan Peterson?
So exactly, everyone's talking about him. Why? It's because he is having the level 1 conversation in a really fascinating way. And he's using the language of the secular world to basically talk about the gospel. And that's why all the LDS people are like, dude, it sounds like he's talking about the same stuff that we are. And we're like, yeah, he is. He is talking about the things that Western society and the Christian world has been talking about for millennia, but we forgot about that conversation. We already had the conversation. And the restoration was like at the end of that conversation, it was like people believed in God, Christianity emerged, and then like the restoration came, and now our kind of woke society has eaten away at the foundations, and now everyone, and I'm not saying obviously within the church this happens, but people are now in a nihilistic place looking for meaning in their lives. And that's the level 1. I feel meaningless. Is there anything meaningful in my life? There it is.
Yeah, there it is right here. Check this out. So that's
I
Jordan Peterson.
Oh my gosh.
Was a Red Skull in Ta-Nehisi Coates' what's it called? In Ta-Nehisi Coates' version of the Marvel comic. It was pretty funny. So anyway,
that
keep
is
going.
such a reference.
Look, see how it says 10 rules for life?
Exactly.
But he wrote the book 12 Rules for Life. And dude, if you look at the picture, man, like let me pull up the rest of the picture here, okay? But if you like pull up the picture, dude, it's like totally obvious that it's him. They did the entire comic book like with all of these references to him in it. It was actually really freaking funny. But yeah, they hate this guy for saying something as simple as like you should get up and make your bed in the morning.
Oh, weird.
I'm kind of wondering how much this could be solved. And by the way, I'm gonna get clowned because everyone knows I don't like superhero movies. Okay, I've only seen a few.
I don't either.
I don't like them. I like the new Batman. Those are good. Wonder Woman 2. It was very bad. Okay, very.
Gal Gadot can do nothing wrong.
You think people are going to get mad at you for saying that was bad?
No, but
that movie was
super
objectively
edgy
bad.
take, not liking Wonder Woman 2, bro. That was a hot take. I'm gonna have to edit that out.
For some reason, I teared up twice in that very bad movie. Okay,
Wow.
What, the Batman?
No, in the Wonder Woman 2.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I saw the first one. So I was kind of going in like,
first one's actually pretty
why
good.
is this in a mall? I was like, what's going on? So the first time was when they're all renouncing their wishes because they all see how horrible the world is when your innermost selfish desires get fulfilled, how everybody suffers, and they all collectively decided to not be selfish. Horrible movie. That was actually a very beautiful scene. And I was
really
like,
impactful moment.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And then it was followed up by the bad guy who is so chasing his own desires so much. he neglected the most important thing was his family and his son.
The
and
child.
as he's running through the rubble of the world he just destroyed, he's yelling his son's name, afraid that his son is dead because of his own actions, his lack of fatherness. And then they like embraces him and he sees it. It was like, actually, like those two scenes are actually
pretty profound.
everything sucked before that, and those two scenes are really beautiful and very profound. Like that for a mainstream movie to say, hey, your selfish desires and your lack of care about your family and the lineage you come from is going to destroy you internally and the world is a very bold narrative for a mainstream Avenger, a superhero movie to take. I think they should be applauded for that.
Yeah.
The rest of it,
applause for
where she
Wonder
turned
Woman
into
2.
a cat, was like the SNL chick was like a cat hybrid. That was weird. and then that the whole that was weird all before
I
that.
thought you'd be down with the human animal hybrid thing.
No,
dude.
and they ruined it. I love human animal hybrids. And then when they go into Saudi Arabia and he's like marching in, he was like, "I want your army," and they're like, "What is this Disney movie I'm watching?"
Dang it! Now I have to watch the movie.
Have you not seen it?
No.
You literally just those two scenes are worth it.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
and then I also have to edit out your pejorative. I don't know.
You can say
Disney.
right now. Disney's in hot water.
Yeah, I was about gonna say. Have you seen the new shirts that I love? Instead of saying "Okay Boomer," it says "Okay Groomer," and it's
Yes,
got the
those are
Disney
great.
logo on it.
Oh shoot!
Yeah,
Well,
that's pretty hilarious.
yeah.
Okay, well, we're going back to so you rebuilt your faith from the ground up.
Yes, I
You
would
tore
say
it down to the foundation, past where they have the tunnels that they snuck the Freemasons in, and then you rebuilt it from the ground up. The first level being general belief in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Second level being belief in Jesus Christ.
yes.
Okay, cool. And then that's
That's the foundation.
That's the foundation,
That's the
okay.
foundation for where the church operates. The church operates at level 3. Our church
which,
is,
according to Kwaku, is Wonder Woman. But
so at level, that's the other thing is I actually have a question about it. I'm not 100% sure, and maybe you guys can give me feedback on it. Like, does the church need to I think the church
Yes.
has a role at all the levels, but our faith specifically, people of belief generally,
Yeah.
we can
Yes.
work with everyone at the level of theism, right? We can work with all believers to say, we're all in this together to get people to believe in a higher power. Now, amongst those who believe in some kind of a higher power, got the people kind of like the vague spiritualists, as I call them. It's like our goal with other Christians is at least, heck, I'm happy when people go and join some kind of a Christian church. They're moving closer to the truth, right? So again, I look at that project, the level 2 project, as a project that's much broader than the church. What the church is about taking the people at level 2 and moving them to level 3, to showing them the fullness of the gospel. So you have it from sort of this hazy Jordan Peterson ideas about higher power and God, moving into a narrative about Christianity that the New Testament is fundamentally telling the truth. And then from that, we can move people into the restoration. Because you're not going to get secular people to just jump right to the restoration. You can get people that'll do it just on feelings, but intellectually, you have to go through that process for our message to make any sense ultimately. Because it doesn't make any sense unless you have a basis of belief in God and Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think people, here's the question everyone should ask themselves, and you should ask your own people and everything. If you left the church, would you still be a Christian?
No, I would be a degenerate, fornicating, drug somehow involved.
So if Joseph Smith,
violent, all kinds of bad person.
But that's the question. But why? Because your entire belief in Jesus Christ is predicated entirely on what Joseph Smith said.
So here's the hard thing for me when I hear this and when I think about it. It's that the way that Joseph Smith conceptualizes Jesus Christ and God the Father is the only one that makes sense to me.
That's right.
Because if God is not our Father, why would he care to give us commandments?
Yeah, and
Let's bounce back then. Let's bounce back one. Would you still retain belief that God exists?
okay, I would say yes to the belief in God, but the reason why I'm with Brad and Quaco on this is I could be a basic Christian because basic Christianity is freaking weird. Like I'm sorry.
Okay.
You
Well,
read
hold
like
on.
what's this Nicene Creed that they all say
Then
they
why not
believe?
why not
that
be a-
God is everything but nothing. That He's omnipresent without even existing, and it's like. That's as weird as modern like gender fluid theory, self-identifying one day as a pony,
here's
the
the
next
thing.
day as a
Are
furry,
there-
the next day as a woman.
Are you creating
and
a
then
false?
a man? It's like what like
Connected the Nicene Creed to furries.
well, but like the Nicene Creed. That's the thing, though, is like the Nicene Creed is the original gangster.
You're talking
of just
about the
putting
Athanasian
everything.
Creed.
I think you're talking about
The Creed of Athanasius.
Oh, sorry. The Nicene Creed is when they came out and they said that was when they tried to define the Trinity.
No, body without body parts or passions. That's all.
Yeah,
the
but-
Athanasian Creed.
Okay, so the Athanasian Creed, whatever, fine. 4th
Get your
century
creeds right.
Christianity. So 4th century Christianity, it's Kwaku, you said this once. It's the original gangster of just postmodernist mush crammed into
Hold on.
one-
And this is what happens.
First, then
Here's what happens. You're right. Our faith is very good at showing why the other versions of Christianity don't stand on much of a leg. However, is there any possibility that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, but that Joseph Smith was not telling the truth?
Yes. I here's my take on that is I agree. I would believe in God. I could not believe in Christianity as mainstream world Christianity as it's defined without Joseph Smith because the traditional.
But I'm not asking if you could believe in another church. I'm saying, could you believe that Jesus Christ in the New
I'm
Testament
gonna
existed?
get there.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't think mainstream Christianity makes sense, and so I would probably be a believer of like New Age. Universal religion type.
No, I know exactly what you'd be.
Ascended masters.
Yeah, no, one step better. You would dig up the skull of the lady that formed the Church Universal and Triumphant.
I would go to Montana and take over their little thing.
Yeah, and then you would walk into that chapel and you would say, "She spoke to me. You all now must listen to me," and then you'd start your own cargo cult in the middle of Montana,
all chanting about the violet flame. It would be great.
I am the violet flame. I won't do it.
That was epic.
No, I do. I've seen too much and felt too much, and had too many dreams for me not to believe in a God and not to believe in anything supernatural or mysticism.
Yep.
But I've read too much to be a mainstream Christian.
Yes. Okay. So
if Joseph Smith fell through, I would probably just be a new age shaman guru woo woo.
Awesome. And a lot of people go that route to where they go, I call it vague spirituality, right? You believe in some kind of a higher power. There's no definition to it. Fine. A lot of people get stuck there. My thing is that the New Testament, do you believe in that story that Jesus Christ lived and rose from the dead?
I would believe in
Joseph
Jesus
Smith?
Christ. Like where I would settle would be sitting on a rampant scale, okay, and just justifying my sin through vague repentant sound bites that I heard on.
What would happen if you stopped being LDS? Is what
okay.
You'd become. So Cardin would go straight to being Nehor.
Well, no,
Exactly.
I would probably be in a position. I'd be one of those basic bros. If I'm honest with myself, I'd be one of those basic bros. It's like, I'm spiritual, not religious, even though I didn't really practice much of either. You know what I'm saying?
And that is someone who is stuck at level 1.
Yeah.
And what I would say to that is go read to those people who are stuck at level 1. I would ask them this question. I would say to you, okay, you believe in God and a higher power. Now, if you understand the story of Jesus, is there a better explanation for God interacting with the world than that? Like, that story has changed the world. And that's where, again, Jordan Peterson kind of emphasizes this. World history emphasizes this. I personally have come to believe that person, Jesus, if God was anywhere, he was there. And if he wasn't there, then where is he? And if he's not anywhere else.
But then couldn't somebody come and say, well, your American dude raised in Reno, Nevada, white Western suburban upbringing is heavily influenced by the Western tradition
Sure.
that it's based on. And the Western tradition is based predominantly upon the main Western religion, which was the Bible. But guess what? There's other people in this world, you white colonialist, and some of them are Southeast Asians. And Buddhism is beautiful. And so is, for me, example, I think Taoism straight up inspired. One of the most underrated ways of rethinking your faith and reanalyzing through different colored lens glasses your own faith is through the writings in the Tao Te Ching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I could see myself totally going Taoist.
I would say,
And I don't feel like, I feel like actually even going Taoist as a Westerner into the Eastern thought might be more fulfilling than diving deeper into a tradition I was already familiar with. So I could see myself doing that.
so I'd be happy to have someone come and try and convince me that Taoism is superior to Christianity and I talk about this on the level of what I call mere Christianity, right? The C.S. Lewis sort of Christianity, not within any kind of particular creed and denomination.
Yeah, because
Okay?
it's definitely superior to Calvinism,
Yes.
but maybe not.
But the thing is, you have to remember, Jordan Peterson is in essence a type of Christian, right? It's a vague Christianity. It's what I call a mere Christianity, right? And so that mere level of Christianity, I still think is superior to anything else. I think it is way superior to Taoism. Taoism has all sorts of problems, in my opinion. Now, granted, I don't understand
like
that deeply.
what? Names, philosophies. No, I'm just kidding.
Does Taoism, first of all, would result in the Jesus being a liar and a total madman and a fraud. And I think that there's something very powerful when you look at the effects of what Jesus was saying in people's lives. And it is way better. It has produced a world that is way better, demonstrably, than what Taoism has produced. In fact, I think Taoism and sort of that line of thinking, which has produced the Eastern world, has in many ways held it back from real true thriving and finding ultimate well-being. And I look at Jesus Christ's message and I say, look, and I'm not saying Taoism's like terrible and doesn't have a lot of truth in it. It does. But I'm saying is it can take people, maybe make them good, but Christianity can make people, it can revolutionize the world. Okay. Now this is a really deep discussion. Like, why am I a Christian? But what I'm saying is at this level of conversation is where you will find that there is a really interesting conversation to have to where all of a sudden you believe in Jesus Christ, that the Joseph Smith story suddenly shines.
And do you know what I think is interesting is I feel like this is what the church wants you to do, is come to know the character of Christ and come to know who God the Father is, right? And to use the scriptures to be able to do that. And so I feel like you're totally right that when you're renovating your faith and when you're recognizing that something isn't the way that you thought it was, the right place to go is to your relationship with God.
Yep.
It's because you need to understand that foundational relationship with God in order for everything else to make sense.
Yep. And you need to understand the ways in which, and you want to talk about kind of solution, understand the ways in which the world is undermining your faith in God and be ready to address that and protect your foundation.
So how is the world, finish with this, what's the number one way that the world is undermining our relationship with God?
The expressive individualist worldview. Turning around the world and saying you're the center of it. That's what atheism essentially does. It says there is nothing else. If nothing else is out there, then you are God. You're the ultimate thing. Like, it stops and ends with you.
So do you feel that's destructive because it inherently creates a self-aggrandizement, which only leads to disappointment?
Well, it literally has a form of godliness but denies the power thereof.
It also... That's a good point.
Cool.
And it also, when you are the center of the universe, it says you get to define yourself however the heck you want.
Well, but the weird thing is, though, couldn't you say that expressive individualism is simply placing a high value on what you bring to the table as an individual child of God? And
No.
no.
And here's why. Because expressive individualism isn't just saying, hey, you're an individual. We're all good with that. Bring your talents to the table. We're all different. We all have different talents, unique, wonderful. That's great. What it does is...
Because don't we as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints emphatically declare your ultimate value as a child of God
Yeah.
and that he is intimately
But
aware
that
of
is-
even the
that
finest
fits-
details
that
in your life.
fits within a plan. It says we are fundamentally saying there is a game being played.
And I would say, Cardin, that what you're describing sounds more like a divine individualism, where you're
I
getting
like
your
that.
individualism
I like that.
put into the actual context of the plan, where expressive individualism, the good itself, is in expressing your individuality, right?
Okay.
Yes. Yes. It says you are the center of the universe because at the end of the day, that's all there is you, and you get to define your own game. You're not a part of any game. There is no game. They're all social constructs. So construct your own reality and live it out. And
Okay.
the only bad people are the ones that stop you from being whatever you want to be.
Okay. So finish us up. Where do people start to get, because you obviously seem very confident in your new renovated testimony or renovated faith Christ, whatever you called it, faith renovation.
Yes.
So you've remodeled the kitchen and now you're showing it off to your friends. You've renovated your faith. Now you're showing it off to your friends. They say, "Oh, I love your tile. Where'd you get it?" Where do people start that want to renovate their faith as you did?
I would actually, and this may sound funny because people tend to think I'm super orthodox, go outside the church. I actually want you to start to go and see the best arguments of theism for why does God exist, and not just the arguments that come from our church, because our church actually doesn't address that question much. The arguments for why it's rational and intelligent and why theism is a better argument than atheism.
Wait, so you're suggesting that our church doesn't do a good job?
I
and
think
by our
they-
church, you mean the leadership?
I mean
predominantly of what
No.
generation?
I don't think
No,
it's
I'm just
necessary. I think the church's role is to preach to those that are at level 2 to bring them into level 3. And then I would say that I think that there's a bigger project going on. There's the project of believers. And you should know and understand what other believers say and why atheism is wrong. Because it is, and it's not a good position. And then from there, you should look at the Christians and why, out of all the conceptions of God that are out there, why is Christianity superior to other conceptions of the ultimate power? And read C.S. Lewis, read George MacDonald, read G.K. Chesterton. I mean, those guys are awesome, right? Those are guys at kind of that level of conversation. And then now you're ready for the church. Now all of a sudden the church is going to freaking shine. And if there are things in the restoration that are hard to figure out, I'm kind of like, well, all right, that's hard to figure out. But at the end of the day, I still believe that Jesus was the Christ, and I still believe that this is the best explanation for what he's about.
Wow. Okay, cool. Well, that's all I got. And at this point, I feel intimidated to contribute much more because whatever you said it with enough conviction that I would just feel like I'd lose the argument if I tried. So this is Midnight Mormons. See you in the next episode.